Cool.
Okay, we've got it
Yeah.
out.
Thanks for the intro. That was amazing, Adam, and appreciate the wrap as well. Is my mic working?
Yeah, should be.
Check, check. Don't know how we're going to follow up that wrap. That was, yeah, wasn't expecting that. Cool. All right. So, yeah, like Adam and Cham mentioned, our talk today is called Figmatic, why Figma will be remembered as a genre-defining classic.
Yeah, we don't use the term genre defining lightly, I guess, but hopefully by the end of this talk, we'll have proven to you why we can kind of call it that. And yeah, as Adam sort of mentioned, we've been using it from the start. So we've gone through all the peaks and troughs of Figma, but we kind of believe now that it's a pretty powerful tool and we love using it.
Cool. All right. So my name's Scott. I'm a senior digital designer at Mass. Along with Marty.
Also senior digital designer. And yeah, I used to work with Tim at Reactive, so that's how I kind of know him. But yeah, we thought it might just be good to give you a bit of context to us at the studio, because I think that'll sort of set up a lot of the points that we're talking to around Figma. So well, let's just get straight into it.
I think so. So here's a photo of us in our studio we shot. So that's me, Marty, Tim, and Chintz, who's the GM.
Yeah, we just moved to a new studio at the end of last year to a converted warehouse in Fitzroy. Pretty cliche, but it's a great spot and it's all done up now. So yeah, no, we're loving it.
Okay, so it's worth mentioning we are an all design studio. So we don't do any development, and essentially, yeah, that's us. So we're all designers, like me and Marty. Also, we get other freelancers in and part-timers as well. So Alex here, he sometimes swings through, makes a cameo. No dev. We're often just partnering with other dev teams. But yeah, we don't do any sort of production level development.
Yeah, so generally how it works is either we'll work with a sort of internal design team. So that'll be a design team that's kind of at, you know, the offices of the client, or it'll be a third party. They can be kind of locally, or we've worked with some international development studios and also some interstate as well. So, you know, from all around.
So our focus is digital products and services. So for that, I mean, by that we mean we're not doing much campaign stuff, advertising, etc. It's more just like products. I mean, everyone's got a different definition for what a product is, but platforms, you know, internal systems, etc.
And this is an important thing to note, where it's a bit of a sort of rule in the studio that we never work on site. There's only two of us. Two full-time designers and Tim, who's part-time. So if one of us was taken out, I wouldn't leave many left at the studio. So it's a bit of a rule of thumb, but we kind of hold true. And for that, we've had to make our tools work really hard to kind of overcome the problem of not being able to sit next to your developer and having you know, all the positives that come with that. So you know, we'll get to it later, but Figma's have really allowed us to close that gap and kind of make that geographic sort of space sort of not a problem or not an issue for us.
I was going to say, and this photo is actually one of our clients on site. So we often want to get our clients down working with us, but yeah, we don't want to leave Fitzroy basically, ideally. Cool. All right, roaming freelancers. So like I mentioned, sometimes we get a bunch of freelancers in, or not a bunch, actually one or two at a time. But it's a little bit like we got the core of the Wu-Tang Clan, you know, the core members, everyone knows Method Man, Ghostface, etc. But then there's a whole bunch of extra dudes on stage down the bottom, the affiliates, Killer Army, Capadonna, etc. They all get involved. So.
Yeah, and it's really important to note, because these freelancers are sort of floating in and out, we don't really have enough time at all to do sort of detailed handovers or spend a lot of time taking them through you know, where the latest file is, or suddenly they don't have access to the server, or they need a password for the server. Like, we don't just have time for all that hoopla. So we need something that we can, you know, a tool that sort of brings it all in one place, and the handover is virtually zero. So,
yeah, I mean, always starting fresh. So what we mean by that, a few things. Here we're setting up a new project in Figma, but what we're often doing is, you know, we're part of, so we're design only. We're part of, we're partnering with a whole bunch of other different teams. So development team, for example, we're always having to rebuild that relationship. And we're also getting the chance to redefine the tools that we're using every project. So we often will have a retro at the end of the project, decide, you know, what worked, what didn't work. And we try to use every project as an opportunity to refine our process. So.
And it's term over-deliver. It's not a sort of a way to brag, but kind of in our situation, we sort of want to do more than maybe what's necessary to kind of mitigate the risk on our behalf, so that whatever we do hand over, there's kind of no questions. So that's all we can do. We can kind of do the maximum amount and leave no stone unturned. But we're also still questioning what's the least amount that we could possibly do, and instead focus all that energy of just designing screen after screen after screen, instead on just improving experience, on improving the interaction, on actually working with the developers. So that's still something we're fine tuning, but you know, hopefully that it gets better and better. But I think we have been a victim of just doing loads and loads of screens for no real reason, only to kind of make us feel better that we're not accounting for something. So
I mean, we're often working with like full stack developers, for example, who don't, I mean, in our experience, don't have a sort of innate sense of how something should animate, etc. So we do a whole bunch of principal animations as well, which is what we're showing here.
It's probably a good time to kind of mention what this talk isn't, and it's definitely not going to be a tutorial. So we're not just going to go through the Figma interface and tell you what each feature does. I think there's plenty of good resource out there. There's a lot of great articles out there that will describe that. And you're probably best to just go in there and kind of have a crack yourself. There's also the DesignOps website, and there's 2 great articles out there that you can read that are probably going to do a better job of going through it than we will. So definitely not a tutorial tonight.
Not a sales pitch. Unfortunately, we don't have a referral code for Figma, or else it would be. But yeah, we're not here to sell anyone. We love a whole bunch of different tools, etc. This particular talk's just on Figma. And
it's definitely not going to be a bashing of other well-known pieces of software. We're seeing a lot of articles out there where it's like Figma versus design. It's this very kind of binary one-on-one. You've got to pick one, or you've got to choose sides almost. And we kind of liken it to some of that East Coast, West Coast beef back in the early 90s, where it's like, well, you like the West Coast because you like sort of the funk style, or you like the East Coast, the Wu-Tangs, the Nas, the Tribe Called Quest. That's much more raw, much more genuine. But at the end of the day, they're both really good. So, you know, why don't you just like all the music? And yeah, I think I've got a few other things there, but we'll keep it moving. But what this talk is really, the only thing we can speak with some authority about is just our experience of using Figma at mass from when we started, I think in 2016, at some point.
Early 2017?
Yeah, I can't remember.
2016 sounds pretty good.
Yeah, maybe the end of 2016, something like that. But it was very early days. But really, this is a talk really about how we've integrated into our workflow, and actually how we've been able to change how we work individually as a studio. So me and Scott and Tim, and also with clients, probably the most important. It's actually made projects that probably wouldn't have been possible, which is great, and allows us to keep working how we love to, which is at, in Fitzroy, not on site, using the tools that are out now. Tim, if you were at the last talk, said it's probably the best time to be a designer. The tools are so good, and there's new ones coming out all the time. So if you're a digital designer or you're doing product or UI, it's like there's just so much good stuff out there.
Okay, so our first chapter is called The Genesis. So what we really wanted to talk about here was essentially just how we got on board with Figma. So how it happened was, we were really comfortable in Sketch, and I really had no need to want to switch. We didn't actually know anything. First thing I'd heard of Figma, just dating, I actually think it was maybe around February 2017. And yeah, we have a client who's just really, I guess, just on the bleeding edge with their tools. So they introduced us to a whole bunch of stuff. At the time, we hadn't used real-time board, and group map, and all these things. And one tool they were using was Figma. And yeah, I think there was not too much more to it than that. They were like, hey, jump into Figma, see the work we've been doing. And we were like, wow, this is great. So we essentially started using it for wireframing only. And we would do final UI in Sketch.
We've done a bunch of Sketch projects before that, where we'd use component-based design, and we used all the things that we're kind of calling a design system now. So we had experience designing that way. So it wasn't like we just got to Figma and suddenly we're doing this new thing. We had kind of had some experience in Sketch, and we're all super happy with it. It's an awesome tool, and it's no surprise why it's industry standard. But I think this product that we started working on was our first kind of foray into doing a product from its inception, and there was a lot of clients at their office, and it was we were all working on it at that point. So we just needed a way to be able to all collaborate at the same time.
Yeah, I guess as well. Plus, we were doing like bi-weekly check-ins with them as well. So it was actually Marty, myself, and Tim all wireframing simultaneously at the time. So I think as well. So what are we seeing here? We're seeing looks like Zeppelin. Yeah. So initially we only used it for wireframing. Then when Figma brought in the Zeppelin integration, I think it was late last year, we decided, I think it was September even, we said, okay, cool, we're going to commit to doing everything in Figma, all our final UI.
Yeah, we're still skeptical about really merging everything from Sketch to Figma. I think Figma was still ironing out a few bugs, and it was only when they got the Zeppelin integration that we sort of made that decision. But up until then, we were kind of using the two tools in tandem. But this screenshot here is kind of one of the reasons why we probably moved across in the end, is that I finished off a project, and a lot of the feedback loop and the uploading of screens was done through InVision, which was a real pain. It was, I think, Chan, you alluded to that fact of actually not designing, and it took up most of my time to export PNGs, and no one wants to do any of that stuff. So it's hard to figure out what was the latest, and had all these issues, and just ended up with hundreds and hundreds of screens. So it was always in the back of my mind of how we can kind of consolidate sort of everything, and it brings us to kind of this chapter, which is called the mass state of mind.
Okay, so what we're sort of running through here on the left, I guess, is just traditionally, I guess, just the environment that you might find yourself in as a designer using tools other than Sketch. Other than Figma, so like Sketch, for example. So siloed, so you're working by yourself on your computer, completely independently. There's presentations with the client, so there's a kind of bit of a wind up to every presentation. There's preparation involved with that.
Yeah, more so from you kind of build yourself up to this presentation, and it's you put all this pressure on yourself to do the best work and to distill maybe hours, days of work into a really concise piece, and just expect the client to also just sit back and kind of keep their mouth shut, and then respond at the end. So it's kind of unfair on both parties to really to kind of show your work that way.
I mean, this one's pretty obvious, client versus designer. So there is that relationship where I'm presenting, you're listening, like Marty's alluding to. I mean, then we're going to capture feedback. There's this sort of, I guess, the way the traffic is moving. It's moving one way, then it's moving the other way, versus multiple ways at the same time. So,
and this idea of being precious about your work, I think that's a trait that we all can kind of, it's part of being a designer, I guess. Is that you want to do the work and you want to do it the best possible way, and you want to make it really good before you show anyone. But I think now it's about sort of circulating it earlier, getting involvement earlier, whether it's a developer, whether it's a client, and just being, I guess, less sort of precious. And yeah, I mean, this one is probably more geared to digital designers and product, and the idea of sort of pages is kind of comes from that Photoshop era where you're just kind of looking at that one page in that one instance in that one state, and not kind of considering everything else. And for so long that was the norm, but now it's we want to get out of that, I think, eventually, and we have been luckily through the tools in the last couple of years.
So I guess, yeah, on the right hand side here, we're looking at, I guess, what we're calling the mass state of mind right now. So pretty obvious. The things that we're sort of talking about collaborative. We're talking about, instead of having presentations to the client, we're talking about having discussions with the client and designer. I mean, that sounds a little bit corny, but through our experience with Figma, that's sort of the relationship we've been able to achieve often. Yeah, the transparency, that's a huge one, which you'll see as we sort of go through our talk. But like Marty sort of alluded to, even just within our team, you know, like you often be, I mean, traditionally you'd be working on a page or whatever, some element, and you don't even necessarily want anyone to see it, let alone anyone in your team or the client. But I think for us, it's just sort of getting comfortable with showing your work in any state. Yeah. And user flows. So yeah, like Marty mentioned, we're just, I guess, just moving more towards showing user flows, user journeys, rather than siloed pages, independent pages.
Which is what happens when you export PNGs and send them a screen. It's just out of context, and it's certainly not that effective at all. So, but I guess if there's one sort of overarching thing which kind of convinced us to kind of make the move and to ditch other sort of design tools altogether, is the fact that yeah, it is live and direct. And
yeah, so in this case, you know, like multiple people could be working on one artboard, or sorry, one frame at a time, recoloring stuff, moving stuff around, or all in the same file, all in different files. So it's live and direct at all times.
Which we've, yeah, so yeah, we can elaborate on that a bit more, but that's essentially, if you distill it down, that's kind of what it had over all the other tools. And if you thought about all those things on the right, how are we going to get to that in terms of a tool? We've been able to find that through using Figma.
Life's a glitch and then you die. So just more, I guess, more context to our use of Figma. On the left-hand side here, we've got a channel on Slack called IT Woes. Our old studio in Collingwood, we only had 8SL2, and it was super flaky. We would get some of the like atrocious speeds. So yeah, here's us just complaining about our internet. I guess what we found with Figma, even though we had such shit internet, it could still hold up. It's still syncing. It's the file is constantly syncing, and we couldn't get like Google Drive to work. We couldn't get our server to sync. It was pretty sketchy. But Figma was always syncing, which was pretty amazing, I guess, under the conditions that we were using it.
We're doing a lot of VC calls, and VC is going to cut out, or was cutting out pretty regularly. So, you know, the alternate way was just get on the phone and kind of guess what, you know, the PNG that you're looking at or whatever. But we're able to sort of kind of use Figma and then have them follow us and kind of see what we're seeing just through the phone. So very practically, like our situation was terrible internet. We had to ban a lot of VC calls. So luckily we're still able to show work in that instance. It's also worth noting the 404s and sort of a Figma going down, there is that inherent risk of, you know, when all your stuff's in this one bit of software that, you know, you're not going to be able to use it, but, you know, everything, you know, considering everything that it's doing, that it hasn't actually gone down that much, if at all. So it's not a big deal for us.
Plus, I think as well, so like I mentioned, we were just using Figma for wireframing when we first started. Also, Figma was free back then, so we weren't expecting a whole lot. But there's one little shot in there with the blue background, and that's like what would happen. We would come into a file and, you know, you've got an icon there, but then you come into it the next day and pieces that would be missing. Don't know exactly where they were just hidden. I think that often they were just hidden like down the layer stack. Maybe the layer order had changed, but that was pretty frustrating. And that was sort of one of the limitations that we sort of, or I guess reservations we had with doing final UI in Figma. But yeah, they seem to iron that out. So
yeah, all good now.
The file is yours and everyone's.
So I'm not sure if you can see this in much detail, but that's a that's just a couple of screen grabs of some of my folders from previous projects when we weren't on Figma. And this is kind of the problem that we've all been talking about single source of truth, just design management generally. You've got versions up to there's about 24 or something. There's folders full of exports. There's folders appended with sort of our initials because we worked on it, and I sent file to Scott. Actually couldn't upload it, had to give it to him on a USB because the internet's no good. So, you know, I had to do that. That's taken time. There's a few more instances there, but that's generally what it was. That was our life for a while. And that was frustrating, but that's kind of all we knew, and we sort of just made it work.
Plus, I mean, as well, like I mentioned with the freelancers, harassing freelancers on their days off, saying, hey, where's the files? Where should I look? Is it on the server? What's the latest? That type of thing. I guess, yeah, versus in Figma, the way we use it, there's typically only one, so you might have a project, but there's one file, and that file has a version history. If you're familiar with Sketch, okay, so there's a version history there. But I think the thing we like about it most is, yeah, like Marty alluded to, it's a single source of truth. You know where to go. So Alex comes and works on a project for a couple of days. I don't have to hit him up. I can just literally find the most recent version. I can actually go to my projects and have them ordered by recently viewed and jump in there and get working. So that's, yeah.
I think we've all experienced something rather has unexpectedly quit. But luckily we've got autosave, and even if you try and do Command S, it comes up with this nice sort of message saying Figma autosave. So it's doing a lot of heavy lifting in the background, which you don't really notice. But it's not a blocker, which is great. It just allows you to kind of get on with it and just kind of start doing work, which is really important. Half time.
You want to talk about this one, Marty?
Yeah, no, we actually didn't really have anything. So I'm just going to go quick.
Well, we didn't have anything for halftime, but it was there's a song on Illmatic called Halftime, so we just threw it in there.
Shout out to Murph Hughes. Don't know who that is.
Oh, DJ,
yeah.
There you go. DJ Eames, thank you.
You want to drink that? Are you good?
I'm good.
Are you good? All right.
Okay.
All right.
Cool. All right. So yeah. So next chapter, every frame sitting in the div.
Yeah.
It's a pretty confusing title, but
I think the real title is called Memory Lane Sitting in the Park. Yeah. So we tried to come with some snazzy titles, but that one was a bit tough. But generally, so familiar with Sketch, you're going to be pretty familiar with Figma. I think a lot of the same, you know, what do we call them?
I guess just general features and principles are all there, you know. So I mean,
there's a corresponding feature. They might call it something different, but the principle is essentially the same. I think the one thing that they probably did a little bit differently is this idea of frames. So we're all familiar with artboards, and that's great. They work really, really well. But Figma didn't do any of that. They just stuck with this idea of frames, and I think they wrote about it very early on in some of their first articles. But a frame essentially was designed to mimic a div tag, I think. Not too sure on the details more than that, but in terms of the behavior, in terms of constraints, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, so essentially you can do things like I mean, it's a little bit like in CSS, for example, you might float something left or right, or have it absolute positioned left or right, for example. So in this example, Marty's resizing the container. You can see those circles up in the top right-hand side are being pinned. The other content's reflowing, those middle containers are flexing as well. So these are just things, they're called constraints in Figma. And yeah.
It's the same thing in Sketch as well.
Yeah.
But I think it just behaves a little bit differently. It certainly changed the way I've kind of started designing as well. I'm not really using groups as such anymore. I think a frame just gives you a bit more flexibility to design, I guess, less of those arbitrary sizes and more just kind of do one and sort of just play with it. If you set up correctly, it actually saves you a lot of time. So, you know, there's other things that you can do, textiles and all this sort of stuff, which they've just implemented, which they've kind of done a little bit differently, which we'll sort of talk about in a sec. But effectively, you know, this is just a really quick way, a really good way to kind of set up your file and not have to spend the time just designing screens and sizes in isolation. Cool.
Okay, so yeah, we're talking about text styles here a little bit. So one of those things, we know this is one of those features that Figma were getting hounded for, and even by us, you know. So we're like, it's one of those things in Sketch. How do you do a large project? You know, we're coming from Sketch without doing text styles. So we had sort of gotten around it. We were doing a lot of copy and pasting styles. That's how we'd probably carry our sort of, you know, like a bit of a master sheet around with us and copy and paste them over. I think just, you might want to say some more on this, Marty, but we sort of just think what we're finding with Figma is they will obviously listen to the feedback and not necessarily rush to release something or add the feature. I think the way that they seem to be thinking about these features is a little bit more robustly, and at least with styles, they seem to have taken their time and rolled something out that's actually really powerful and better in our minds than other tools. So,
yeah, this is an example on the left of a project we'd set up for a client, and the fact that you have to do a separate style for alignment, color, and size and font is going to mean that you're going to have triple, sometimes 4 times the amount of styles you actually need, and that's not how it's kind of built. So the way they've kind of done it is more aligned to how it's built in code. So it's much more streamlined, much easier, and keeps your sort of style sheet a lot cleaner.
So a little bit more like, you know, like variables or something in CSS, you know. So in this case, we've just got actually like a font, like, sorry, you can change the font type or color or weight or anything like that independently. Even when we're doing this presentation, we're like, we're doing drop shadows on our images, and it was halfway through and we're like, oh, we should just have that as an effect style. So it's as worth mentioning as well. This just got released in the official version. We had the beta, and it seemed pretty rock solid to us. But I guess since they've rolled it out officially, we haven't kicked off any heavy duty projects yet. But when we do, no doubt we'll be we'll be using it.
Cool. Next section is called Many Loves, and I think this section is mainly about from memory. Just I guess that they've built it and not tried to reinvent the wheel in many ways. Like there's a lot of familiarity, which I think is good for us when we transition, but also those roaming freelancers that we spoke of. Alex can probably testify to this. Coming in, heavy Sketch user, there's no learning curve. And that means that in a studio where we're doing things pretty quickly, that we don't have to spend the time with him, or he doesn't have to spend the time upskilling. So panels and toolbars is just an example of that. It's all familiar. It's all similar to the Adobe products that we used back in the day, but also Sketch more importantly, if we have freelancers or sort of part-time designers coming in.
As a vector-based, I mean, we don't need to talk about this too much, but I mean, it has to be vector-based essentially these days to be able to hang. So like Sketch, like Illustrator, it makes sense that it's vector-based. Reusable elements. So if you're familiar with symbols in Sketch, we've got components in Figma.
They work the same way. So yeah, just means that you can do all the things you wanted to do, and you can design all the products that you're sort of used to designing in much the same way. So yeah, that's awesome.
Outline view is a relatively new feature. So I don't know if it's, I mean, I was a big fan of Illustrator, and the fact that you could do outline view in case you like lost some graphics or whatever. They brought this in now. It's awesome. If you just lose something in layer stack, just Command Y.
Prototyping again's a pretty common feature, but something they just brought in with some updates. So it's really nice now that, you know, we use Marvel and a couple of others a few times, and we like using those, but if we can just keep things in the one tool, it makes it infinitely easy for us. We're not having to send clients to sort of other websites or anything else. So yeah, it's great to kind of see them doing that. But ultimately, it's just good for us because as kind of the core team, you know, we're really looking to maximize our time as much as possible. So if someone comes in and they just need a quick session, then hopefully they can pick it up reasonably quickly.
Okay, so where are we at? Chapter 8, one place for your mind and team. So this is, I think we're going to try and cover off a little bit in this section, but what we're looking at here is, and we're going to have a bit of a demo later, but on the left-hand side, we've got everyone that was sort of invited to a project. So that could be other designers, also the client as well. So it's worth mentioning, you can have unlimited viewers, I think, on a project, and you don't have to pay anything. So the client can be a viewer. I mean, there could be 10 people on the client team, and they could all be viewers and view it anywhere, really. They could view it either in the Figma app or in the browser on a Windows machine. It's completely platform agnostic, which is actually amazing. You know, like we sort of, when we were doing this talk, when we were thinking about this talk, we were just sort of talked about what would be some of those killer features that we would really miss if we had to switch off Figma. And that's definitely one of them.
I think just for us, it's changed the way we work, because as soon as, even sort of before we start actually designing, we're sending the link straight away to the client. So, you know, the onus is really then on them to kind of get in throughout the week, you know, before a meeting, to kind of look at the work in real time. Especially with the feedback, that problem I kind of had earlier with like having all those screens in InVision and having to direct them there. There's kind of no more of that. Kind of feedback can be ongoing, so it's happening all the time, and that's kind of that discussion point. It's not that presentation anymore, because everyone's just in there. So, and we're finding more and more that client teams are getting bigger and bigger. I think there's one there, probably about a dozen, but they could be up to 20 or something. So being able to quickly just get a link out to them is super important.
I think as well, just on that right-hand side there, we're looking at a few comments. So contextual commenting from, anyone really, the client or us. When we caught up with Adam the other day, we were just talking about it, and I actually forgot that you couldn't do contextual commenting in Sketch. It's really hard to imagine going back from that. You're like literally dropping comments on the actual UI element that you're designing. So if and you can resolve comments. So once you've gone back and forth with the client perhaps to resolve something, you can literally mark it resolved, keep it moving. It's a good feeling, you know.
It's not a new thing either. It's like Google products do that. So again, just being familiar and not trying to reinvent things. So it's kind of nice to be able to, go through and resolve stuff and feel like you're getting through feedback, which is really good. I think they also, getting the link out to them quickly actually gives them an idea of how quickly you're working and your velocity. So you don't just rock up to the meeting with kind of this magical design that they don't know how long it's taken. They can kind of see you working through it and kind of have a bit more empathy that, you're spending the time going through stuff. So it just makes it easier when you do see them that any of that sort of big reveal is not there.
I'll say like on Thursday last week, we pulled up to a showcase, and it wasn't, hey, we're gonna present the work. Like during the week, I'd seen them popping in and out of the file, and so I know they've seen it, and they had time to prepare all the feedback and just sort of refinements that they wanted us to work on. So I actually kicked. I was like, hey, so do you guys even want me to go through this? I know you've seen it already. They're like, no, we've seen it. Let's just talk about the stuff that we want to work on. So it just makes it, it just makes more sense. Let's keep it moving. Let's get to what, making this better.
It's just not waste time going over stuff that I've done and kind of get to actually how we can make it better. So if that's kind of the attitude going into every meeting, then, your meetings are quicker, more efficient, and you're talking about the right things as well.
I think just one thing, we'll just mention here as well. So the fact that it's platform agnostic, and we often are dealing with clients who are they're in a large building. There's a whole bunch of, their internet's locked down, and so they can't necessarily jump in Hangouts or anything else that we might want to jump in. So the fact they can jump in Figma, and we'll probably do a demo of this later, but you can, so say I'm working or I'm moving around the canvas, they can click me and see exactly what I'm looking at. So it's like they can follow me. So it's really awesome. So the other day we had it, and a guy from Momentum, Dean, he's jumped on the phone. He's really happy on the phone. So I'm on the phone to him, and he's just in Figma following me around. We were making tweaks to a prototype on the fly, and yeah, just all in Figma. It's awesome.
So that was before a user testing session as well, which was happening in like half an hour or an hour or so, under a bit of time pressure. And to do something like that, you know, in the old way would have not been possible, would have taken a lot longer. So yeah, we're able to do more, which is good.
So this is just not represent, it's present.
Yeah. So I guess this is just kind of part of what presentations for me used to be. I hate doing PNGs, and actually I just got an email today from a client who just said, can you please send me some JPEGs when you're done? And he knows that there's a Figma file, so I'll send him an email back kind of just saying, here's your JPEGs, but you can also check out the work live at this link. It's old school, and there's just context is not there. They're just getting these, you know, low res sort of things, and then zip files and all this sort of stuff, lengthy emails that you spend time drafting that you have to be really formal with. The PDF presentation, again, just more overhead, more stress that you don't need, which leads into big reveals. And I guess for us, it's, and the type of work we do, it's a bit easier because it's all iterative, and what we're presenting is just a moment in time for that piece of design. I guess it's probably a bit different with branding and sort of other types of design, but at least for us, we're trying to move away from all of this and actually just present the work in the tool that we're using. It makes it less serious. It's kind of, you feel like you're a bit more relaxed, and you're kind of just showing your work in progress essentially. And it's that's the kind of feeling in the room. So no one's expecting kind of finished artwork. They're just commenting on what they're seeing, and hopefully they've seen it during the week. So
I was going to say, so that first, that literally means just cracking open Figma. If they've got, you know, if we can plug in HDMI or whatever onto their screen, that's awesome. The other week, that wasn't working for me, but they had a browser on their TV, so they could jump into the browser, and I just gave them a link. That's been working pretty good. It's worth mentioning, some clients have told us they don't like us zooming in and out when we're presenting. They get confused, so trying to minimize that. But another thing we're finding really cool is, okay, so you got the screen, and that's awesome, but it's often distorted, or the colors are, you know, way off. So we'll jump into Figma, and everyone's got their lappies, and so we just say, hey, just follow me. I'm going to present the work, and so they can see it at scale, like right in front of them on their computer. Hopefully that makes sense, but it's just another awesome feature for presenting, the fact that you can follow.
we've had big issues with presenting on terrible sort of pull down screens, that the colors are all off, things are too big, then they think everything's too big, and then there's this big sort of circle of feedback around sort of stuff looking wrong. So if you can kind of look at it 100%, you know, that's preferred, and they can, because it's just the URL.
Okay, so this may or may not be a surprise, but we've been doing this presentation in Figma. Yeah, we just did it in the prototyping aspect, like the feature of it. So essentially just laid out all the screens and then stitched them up.
Yeah, we actually weren't going to present or do the preso in Figma. We're probably going to do it in Keynote, and it wasn't until we, you know, caught up over dinner, I think a few weeks back, that why don't we do it in Figma? Of course, it makes sense. We've been talking about why it's stupid to have this overhead of doing presentations in other tools. So lucky we.
And we actually have on another client as well. We did like we gave them Figma links. They were telling us, I mean, we're only jumping into Figma once a week. I have no idea what I'm looking at. I'm confused. You know, we still get feedback like that, but I mean, in that particular case, I stitched up, you know, a bunch of screens for these guys just to show, hey, here's the main user flows. Here you go, and he was happy, you know, with that. So it's still within Figma. You know, we're trying to, yeah, you can do present a multitude of ways, and there's simple ways, and there's also more detailed ways.
And kind of the last slide is that really for us, it's not a tough sell at all to talk about all this stuff. It's probably the only thing that we kind of know really well because we're in it every day. But you probably can't read that at all. That's going to be blurry. But I got an email from one of the advocates, customer advocates at Figma, probably a couple months ago. Maybe it was around Easter time. But yeah, he was just hitting me up because I think he noticed that Mass had signed up as a team, and he was just wondering if you could give me a call to talk about sort of their product roadmap and what things they could be working on. And kind of just that is all that we can ask for as a small studio, to feel as if you're contributing to the thing that you're using and actually being heard. You're not just sending a sort of feature request away in this form into the abyss where nothing happens. So he's definitely gotten back a few times, and we've seen stuff implemented that we've talked about. So I mean, that's great that you know, you can have firsthand kind of effect on what you're using, and yeah, that's awesome for us.
It's awesome. You know, obviously, like Adam's been in touch with Sarah as well. I think we just really like to be in touch with other businesses which feel approachable, you know, feel human. We also really like Zeppelin. They've been really cool to us in terms of just responding to all our feedback. And I don't know, I guess it kind of aligns with our studio as well. Like, we're not this huge behemoth of a studio. So when we do reach out, I guess it just feels good to hear back and feel like Marty said, feel like our voice is heard.
But sort of above all, I think what we're really looking for in a tool, and what we're kind of getting to with Figma, is that we want something that is as close to the browser experience as possible. The fact that it's built, like it's in the browser, means that it's using web tech already. So I don't think we're far off actually getting to that point where we can be designing something and kind of see it in a browser environment straight away. There's a lot happening with the Sketch and React stuff, and all these sort of things happening. So it's really exciting for us to see that and not have to kind of have that moment where we're unsure. You know, we've handed off a design and we're kind of in that waiting period, seeing what it's going to look like when it comes back. But yeah.
Well, I think well, we try out as many different tools as possible, but I also know, I mean, like we've mentioned, is this golden age of tooling. There's so many tools out there. You know, it's energy, you know, to go and learn new tools all the time. So I mean, I've checked out other tools recently, Webflow and things like that, which are browser-based as well, but they don't necessarily have direct manipulation. You know, for me, it was just like entering values. It was kind of like using the inspector in Chrome or something. So I think it's just having that, being open-minded to the new tooling. For us, we're not even saying Figma's the be-all and end-all for us. You know, like we've always got our eyes open. We love using other tools like Principle, and a whole bunch of other stuff, but for now, Figma's, you know, is doing all these things for us. So yeah, we can't wait to see what's next.
Yeah, that's it from us.
Yeah, that's sort of the end of our talk. What we were planning on doing is a bit of a live demo. So I know a bunch of you guys have signed up for our team, which is the Figmatic team. So if anyone who's signed up or wanted to, or maybe if you have signed up, you could jump into the file. We've got a bit of a thing going on. Try to do something Independence Day related. So I'm going to switch.
So anyone who did bring their laptop, the Wi-Fi details are just on the wall over there. I can read them out to you if you're kind of in the back.
Okay. I need to go here. Hold up.
Yep. So the Wi-Fi network is Culture Amp Guest and password.
Okay, we can see Jared's coming into the file. That's awesome.
Joe, the password is camp with us. It's all in camel case, so not camel case. So capital C for camp, and then with also a W. This is the worst password reading ever. It's camp with us, all one word with capitals for every word. Yeah.
Okay, so just Jared at the moment, but what we thought would be cool is we've got a bunch of like sort of predefined components down the left-hand side here, and in line with the Independence Day thing, there's a scene where Will Smith, I don't really know this by the way, but Will Smith
Fill in the gaps.
okay, punches an alien, and we were just thinking, what does the inside of the alien's cockpit look like, you know, for a spaceship? So we were like, okay, let's do a collaborative dashboard. So cool, we're getting some more people in there. That's awesome. So you can pretty much do whatever you want with this stuff. You could drag them around, you can recolor them, but maybe try and when you do drag the components over, you could drag it over onto one of these frames, these white frames on the right-hand side.
I've also got some Google material, UI kit stuff, and some Apple iOS things if you need some icons or other bits and pieces. But yeah, just go nuts. We're going to see how many people we can get in before it crashes. They've said 10, but I reckon we can push it. We can do more, I think. So we're going to see if we can get everyone that's signed up. We've got, yeah, you should check your email address.
Yeah, if you signed up, these guys have added everyone who signed up with their email address. You should have an email invite, and then that should hopefully let you access the project.
Now,
But if you want to join now and you haven't signed up,
I think Lisa signed up.
oh,
Yeah,
okay.
you signed up with the email, right? So there was a link on the meetup page to fill out the Google form. If you dropped your email address in there, these guys would have added you to the project. So you should have had an email in your inbox, and then that should have a link to accept the invite and join the project. Here we go. So this is everyone's personal details just up on the screen.
Yeah. It's fuzzy. That's all good. Am I good?
That's fine. These screens are shit.
I've got some stuff out. We've got some activities. So
Tiff's in there. Awesome.
we've got some with a red line. That's cool.
Yeah.
I guess as well, so what we're seeing here is this is awesome. This is exactly what we wanted. And just going to get my controls up. So up here, you can see that's me. But if I wanted to follow Lisa,
Yeah, click.
I can just click her.
Yes.
Now she's just static and staying there. I'm going to follow Joe. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not doing anything.
Okay. Jay.
Yeah. I've also got some photo reference in the top left. If you need to include any photos of our stars up the front together. So this is good. It's awesome.
Hey, someone's coming in with a big hand. Okay, so hopefully this is all making sense and it's all pretty clear, but we'd be happy to answer any questions as well if anyone's got anything specific or just anything really.
So the phrase that's been used to describe what you're seeing right now is basically Google Docs for design. So when you're in a Google document and you're seeing other cursors and people are making changes, it's that concept, but for design. And you know, it's in real time. It's just that one source of truth, and it's actually quite incredible. Like it's just out of control. And I think the screens are slightly laggy. These particular screens, that's why my mega cut was a bit laggy before. But on here, it's relatively smooth. Like
This is actually pretty good.
it's okay, but it's much smoother on here.
Yeah, it's awesome when you're, yeah, exactly. Hello, everyone. So how are we going to heart? So when you're working with the client, we're working with the internal design team and you just want to like drop some jokes. It's great. It's great for that, you know, just to lighten the mood. Hey, like, you know, they'll see it eventually. Hey, Dave. And when he's, oh, okay, crazy.
The cursors can be quite sort of intense the first time.
Adam Rapp again.
Yeah.
Oh, stay tuned.
You can turn multiplayer cursors off if that definitely freaks me out sometimes. I'm like, get away, don't be looking at this bit of work. But you can turn off and just pretend that they're not there. So I often do that and it kind of makes you at peace. So you know they're sort of lurking somewhere, the client that is not.
So just while these guys are kind of messing around with Will Smith and is Jeff Goldblum there as well?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, they're together.
Let's throw Jeff in there as well. Get some close-ups. So I guess Just out of my curiosity, and we'll open up to questions shortly, but yeah, I guess looking at this environment, if you imagine all these cursors are clients right now and you've got 12 clients watching your design, how did you personally both get over that vulnerability as designers, being in that workflow for many years, I'm sure, of that grand reveal?
Yeah.
What was your initial experience like that?
I think it was frustration at the start because often they would comment on stuff where they're wanting to do something like, I'm going to get to that. Like I can only go so fast. So there's a bit of that, like, just wait a sec, or they might be looking at something they've interpreted incorrectly. But I think over time, I think they get used to being in there as well. I think it's a bit of a learning curve for them. So once you have a few sort of face-to-face and you kind of establish that, yeah, like we're working on this, we'll get there, then they sort of work out for themselves how often they want to get in and how many times they should be getting in there. So yeah, a bit hard at the start, I think, but it kind of is for the best, I think. So yeah.
I was gonna say, I remember it very vividly because the first day I was in there and designing, and then there was just one of the owners of the business. He came straight into the file and he was just lurking around me, just flying around. It was really unnerving. I was like, I felt very unsettled. Probably only for about half a day. Then after that, I got more and more used to it. Now it's nothing. You know, I'm like, hey, follow me, whatever you want. You actually can't tell if someone's following you. Is the other thing, like clicked on you and is following your cursor around. But yeah, I think it just takes a little bit of time for me personally. And then yeah, I don't even think about it now.
What's happened here?
Just while I've got everyone as well, can I get a quick show of hands of who is actually a designer here? Okay, cool. So like probably, wow.
I don't know, maybe we might have broken it.
That's cool.
We got 12.
Yeah, cool. They did warn us not to go exceed 10, so we said we will exceed 10.
I'm guessing everyone's seeing that white screen as well? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Crazy.
That's what we got there.
Cool. Yeah, awesome. That was, I mean, mission accomplished. So this is basically the scene at the end of Independence Day where they upload that virus that they wrote, somehow knowing what operating system they were using on the ship. You know, they gave it a cold, as Jeff Goldblum likes to say. So I guess we really, fucked up Figma. Which is good. I mean, that's what we wanted to do. So I guess we got a limit of 12 active designers going bananas at the exact same time. Oh, here we go. Yeah. Cool. Okay.
Oh, damn.
Well, has the layer stack just gone funny, do you think?
Oh, Command Y. Command Y.
Someone's probably, Command Y.
Someone accidentally deleted all the...
Oh, yeah.
Oh, they reverted the version?
That sounds exactly like someone who reverted the version would say.
How do you get back?
I guess this is just testing the version control functionality in real time.
Yeah.
Would you like some instrumental Figma?
Sure.
Yeah. What track?
New York State.
All right, you got it.
Hold on. So we can go back to 738. Just see if this loads.
Ooh. Oh, Space Jam. Yep, still the same website from 1997. Amazing. Oh, yeah.
Okay, so I could just restore this. I don't know what's going to happen here. Whether people will just still be live in the file, but
yeah. Well, wait. Has anyone else got questions or comments?
this looks all right.
Yeah. Should we take a visual question? Yeah.
It's a good question. So, like within Sketch, there's actually, so if you see on this right-hand side here, there's design mode, there's prototype mode, and there's code. So that's a little bit like Zeppelin. You know, you can go in there and they can get the actual CSS values and spacing values, margins, padding, etc. So I think what we've been experimenting with lately is just, we haven't been pushing as much stuff up to Zeppelin. We've just been keeping it in Figma and having the developers jump in and inspect it within there. So I guess is about as smooth as we've had it. What we do like about Zeppelin is the ability to have the organization, and you can you can like have sections and all these types of things. So it's a nice tidy place to put all your components, all your content styles and things like that. I think we're still sort of flirting with that idea. We're probably going to kick off a new project in the next month or so, where we'll sort of just decide again, are we still going to use Zeppelin? I think just the last project I worked on, I tried to use Zeppelin with the guys, and then it sort of didn't really take off. So we just kept it in Figma, and they were happy in Figma. So pretty smooth.
Yep.
All right.
All right, cool. It looks like the reverting one worked.
Cool. All right, let's do questions. We had this microphone cube last time, and Kevin, who's not here, seemed to get a lot of joy about like throwing it at people. So unfortunately, it doesn't seem to be working. Yeah. Oh, awesome. Yeah.
I'd one over here, I think, first.
I'll run around with the mic.
Yeah.
We don't know how to turn the dice on. So if you can, welcome to say your name and where you're from, and obviously your question.
And what you do.
I'm Dan. I'm a developer, front-end developer. You talked a bit about getting clients used to seeing the work in progress. Has that ever been a big, like, not insurmountable challenge, but like a notable challenge? Do you have any advice on getting clients used to not just seeing the final product?
Yeah, I think it's, well, definitely for me, I've been working on a financial services platform for about 8 or 9 months now. And I think just through the showcases that we would have every couple of weeks, just work them up to expect a certain level of fidelity. And I'd kind of usually do a bit of an opening spiel and kind of just let them know where I was at, and I was still working on it. So I think for me, it was just about setting the expectation that, there's still some stuff I'm working through. I've kind of just worked up until now, and this is what I've got to show. I haven't overexerted myself or tried to do anything that I didn't think was achievable. I just kind of got to this point, and I think as when they became comfortable with that, and we opened up the working file and they could see that there was a lot of stuff everywhere and a lot of thoughts and a lot of comments, they became more comfortable. So that's just my experience anyway. But it was just over the course of time, it became better and better.
Yeah, just trying to rack my brain as well. I can't think of any particular instance where, that's been feedback from the client. I think just like we mentioned, the nature of our work, it's so iterative often because we're working on product that the client is not necessarily expecting some final polished UI. Like, it's worth mentioning, we at Mass, so we do, like Marty and I, we do wireframing. So we do UX design, we do UI, we do interaction design. We do everything. So what am I trying to get at here? I think it's just the clients that we've been working with are used to that sort of iterative process. So a big reveal has never really been the go.
Most of our clients have been pretty sort of up to speed with sort of how a modern sort of design project is meant to work. I think we've had a few who have had to kind of teach along the way what to expect, but most have had some experience in a development environment or in doing sprints or all these sort of terms. So can kind of expect to see a certain level of work from every fortnight, to every fortnight. So.
You just reminded me though, we actually have had another client where they're so enamored with, I guess, the system of Figma that they're jumping in there, just dropping comments ad nauseum, like commenting on this, to the point where I had to bring it up in the retro. I was saying, like, man, there's so many comments. It's great that you're in there, but I don't know what to action. There's no context to the comment. You're just saying, it was actually a developer, and he was saying, oh, what about this? Like, just dropping edge cases into the file. And I was like, well, who cares? Can you figure it out? It was just going crazy. So we had to say, hey, can you just, measure the comments a little bit? If it's something that you think we can talk about better in person, maybe we'll do that, so yeah.
Cool. I think we had a question down the front here.
Big 4-leaf clover there.
If anything, is there anything in Sketch that you wish was in Figma?
It's a good question. I know. I think we sort of expected someone to ask like this, you know, like do you miss Craft or something like that, like some killer plugin for Sketch. I think for us, man, we've been off Sketch for a decent amount of time now. So like I said, I even forget what's in Sketch. So there's nothing that I completely miss. I'm sure there's things in there which, you know, if you're used to using Craft or Sketch Runner or anything like this, which significantly improved your workflow based on the work you did, if you're maintaining a design system or something like that. For us, I mean, we talked about styles so much, and we were like, man, how are we getting by without styles? You know, there's infinite hacks for styles in Figma. People would be creating components and doing all this crazy stuff. Whereas we had sort of gotten around it by dragging around the sort of master styles text, for example, dragging around the color palette with us. So that was a real bugbear for us. And I mean, it's rolled out now. There's actually, I mean, can you change the nudge settings in Figma now as well? Yep. That was another one. You know, we love Nudge It or whatever it is in Sketch. Switch it to 8 pixels.
You mentioned Craft first up. Their data plugin is pretty important to my workflow. I use it like every day. Has Figma delved into that at all?
Okay, Adam's going to field that one later. But I mean, I think...
You guessed this question.
Yeah, exactly. I guessed this question as well because I think, and only because Alex is a big Sketch advocate, and he's brought it up at our studio. So exactly, like the Craft and the ability to pull in the data. I think when... so there's probably a couple of instances where that might be useful for us. I think when I think of that plugin, it's worth mentioning I haven't used that plugin very much at all. I think I used it once and then I sort of moved off it. But we weren't designing like a shopping site or something like that, which had a whole bunch of like repeatable elements on the page where I necessarily want to pull in photos or data. But Alex, I think when we were working on that cryptocurrency platform, so you mentioned, oh, this would be so much easier to do if I had the Craft plugin, whereas I guess we're kind of expecting our clients almost to not expect all different types of data in the design as well. So if we have stuff repeated, we might have a couple of variations of, you know, someone's name and address and things like that, but then we're just going to copy and paste it. Hopefully they're, you know, educated enough and can sort of deal with that. The Craft one, I guess it's probably worth mentioning, we haven't used it enough to rely on it to the point where we would miss it.
Thank you.
Awesome. Any other questions over here? Hey guys. So we also work in Collingwood. I just want to say our internet is also super fucked up. So you're not alone there. But I know there's like a free version of Figma. Yeah. What is the difference between the Primo version and the free version at the moment?
I think it's just scale. I think you can have a free team with just a couple of people. Maybe it's just 2 people. Is that right? Yeah. And then you've got to pay for extra editors on top of that. Okay. Yeah. There's some extra stuff. Integrations. It's mostly scale.
Yeah. Any other questions? The back here. Sorry, one here, and then we'll jump down here.
Hey, you guys touched on it before, but I'm keen to know, to understand how you use Figma for user testing, if you do user testing, and whether that a whole collaborative sort of approach helps. If there's a specific example, that would be ace.
Yeah, it's a good question. We actually did 3 lots of design sprints a few weeks ago. So if you have done one super tight time frame, that sort of ends with user testing at the end of the week. I guess for that, we didn't actually use Figma itself for the testing. We kind of took it out into, I think, Marble we used. But we certainly, to make the prototypes, kind of had all of us in there kind of helping each other out to get it finished. So in that respect, in terms of just velocity and being able to get something done quickly, it sort of helped us get to the point where we had a decent enough prototype to test, but we really haven't been able to use the new prototyping features because they sort of got released after we do all this research. But I guess I think from here on in, we'll try and kind of use them a bit more frequently and just try and keep everything in here and nice and clean and don't have to export stuff as well. So talking about.
Yeah, exactly. And so we're doing all our flat UI work in Figma, like no matter what. And like Marty's sort of alluding to, when we're doing those design sprints, we've got like next to no time to update content and things like that. So we would have the client, in this case it was Momentum Energy, in the file as well, and they can often, sometimes we'll give them editor access and they can update text and things like that. Saves so much time, you know. And other times they might just jump on the phone and follow me and we'll update the text together if they want to change copy. That's generally how we use it. But yeah, like Marty says, we're always just, I don't know, they're just releasing new features and whatnot. So we'll figure it out. But yeah, we use Marvel and Principle as well for a lot of prototyping, like interaction prototyping.
Another question up the front here, I believe. You're good. You're good, Anthony. Come back. Cheers.
What's your workflow with getting the assets from Figma into Principle?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I did some interaction prototypes in Principle last week, and what was I doing? I think I was just still bumping out PNGs from Figma into a folder and then just dragging them into Principle. So yeah, it doesn't have the sketch integration. To be honest, when we were doing a lot of that sketch and the sketch import, I was finding it like just maybe I wasn't using it exactly right, but I know you can group things a certain way so you don't bring in a whole bunch of extra layers into Principle. But yeah, our workflow was, I guess, a little bit more simpler. We were just bumping out PNGs as needed, slicing them up as we needed. So that's what we're doing in Figma as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to know the difference between like Sketch, Figma, and doing responsive design. I don't know a lot about Figma, haven't looked at it before. I know there is a tool which sort of has locking the edges of the canvas and stuff. Can you explain, is it like still doing your desktop, tablet, mobile design? Or is there any tools that really help make responsive design better?
I think it's definitely using the frames and the constraints in Figma, if you do it sort of right from the start, definitely makes it easier, I think, as a designer to sort of create different sizes quickly. I guess what it can't sort of do is do sort of changing of text sizes on the fly and that more dynamic. So you really don't get that true kind of responsive behavior. So you can do it to a point, but there is still a lot of shortcomings. And generally we're still doing those sizes for developers just because it's kind of a bit of an ingrained thing, but we want to move away from that because we kind of see that doing multiple screens for every use case, and you just end up with a bloated sort of file. A lot of that stuff doesn't even get used. So and I think we're just going to have to kind of continue doing it how we've been doing it, which is those different sizes. But I guess for us to do things more quickly, we can use those features that are there with the constraints to at least just test how those in-between sizes especially might look without actually mocking them up individually.
Any other questions? One over here.
Sorry, guys. I'm going to be one of those annoying question askers, and I'm going to be real greedy and ask two. First one, just on that, that's a good segue. You spoke about constraints a little bit earlier. Is there any kind of ability in Figma for components to be vertically responsive? So if a text line were to break into 2 lines when originally it was 1, would that bump components underneath that down, or?
That's a really good question. I think that's on our wish list. Is just I'm not sure exactly the way to explain it. Someone told me a term which escapes me right now, but just the idea that you could have sort of aware components. That's maybe we even talked about it, I can't remember, but yeah, so say you have I don't know, a component that sits here and it grows in height and it could push the component down. That's on our wish list. We actually had that in our notes. We didn't really talk about it, but as far as we know, not in Figma that we know how to use it. Yeah,
that's definitely number one thing, I think, again, it's just not having to mock up that extra screen. It's just like, let's just do the one and have it be a bit more powerful. So if you are adding an extra line of text, or the client comes in with a change and it's this one little thing that's going to break everything, that it's not a big overhead. So.
But plus just getting closer to the browser, you know, like just getting closer to browser behavior. That's essentially what we're trying to achieve, or what we want.
Cool. Just one more. There's an integral part of my workflow. I call it dirty designing. I liken it to kind of singing in the shower before auditioning for Australian Idol.
Yeah.
Is there any kind of ability to sing in the shower? Because I don't think anyone would want to see me singing naked in the shower.
Hold on. So just so I understand your question.
It's not mocking up those.
Yeah.
Is there somewhere I can sing in private?
Yeah, there's drafts, you know?
Yeah.
There's drafts. So
you don't have to invite anyone. So just be you in the file.
Yeah, with 10 people, it'd be a busy shower.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, so you can, you can draft stuff, then you can drag it to a project once you're ready for, I don't know, the wider community to see you in all your glory.
Thanks, guys.
Nice.
Nice one. Good question. I also in Sketch have a page where it's called Playground, and just making everything dirty. You can do rap battles and things. So if you want an audition for Australian Idol, Adam, I think we have any other questions? Well, we might leave it there and go into a quick break. What is this finished art? What have we got here?
Send it to Will Smith, at Will Smith on Instagram.
Export as PNG and send that to the client.
Yeah, we can do that. Yep, sweet.
Yeah, I mean, anyone who was just using the demo then have any thoughts, or was it kind of what you expected? Anyone have any? Yeah, okay, or share afterwards.
Yeah.
We've got some comments in there too. So.
We'll go into a quick break. Thanks, Scott and Marty. That was absolutely awesome. Thank you.
Cool.